everyone. Welcome to episode number 22 of the Calamasa Insider Podcast. I'm Will Kolbow, City Manager for the City of Calamasa. And today, I want to go over what a typical month looks like for me. Although August maybe is not a typical month because it was probably on the lighter side at times. Because people often wonder what I do as City Manager, and the answer is a whole lot of different things. It's really hard to describe, especially being a city manager in a small town, like I'll talk about in a little bit. But I did spend a good amount of time probably just trying to catch up, playing catch up. Coming off of my vacation the last full week of July. So there's some of that mixed in, but I want to go over kind of some of the typical things that I do on a regular basis. And I'll kind of give a recap of that, and then I'll get into some of the specifics I did on top of those regular things. So we'll get into that in a little bit. I did want to give a quick update, though, before we get to that on County Line Road. As people know, there's work is happening on County Line Road again. This time, it's the installation of the new pipeline by South Mesa Water Company. And they have done their work from Calamasa Boulevard. They have gotten through the roundabout. I think they're going to finish that up today. And they're continuing to, eastward on County Line. At some point, they're going to have to go back and do work from County Line Lane on the other side of the 10 freeway up to Calamasa Boulevard. And so if you hear the background, by the way, that's my dog's paws on the ground, scratching around. So if you hear that in the background, I apologize for that. And then related to the County Line Road traffic improvements, the 3rd Street roundabout construction is scheduled to begin on September 16th at this point. So that's what we're looking for there. So that will shut down that intersection for about 6 to 8 weeks. We will have more on that as we get closer to that, but I just wanted to give people advance notice. Again, 3rd Street roundabout construction will begin on Monday, September 16th. We did get communication from Senator Rosalisa Ochoa-Bogue's office in regards to the Banning DMV. Now, the Banning DMV has been closed since 2021 due to structural issues, but it was considered a temporary closure. Well, because of budget constraints, the DMV has announced that they are going to permanently close the Banning DMV and not try to find an alternative location for it. So, obviously, this is something that got the senator's attention, so she's writing to the DMV and to the governor to try to reverse this decision because that is the only DMV for pass area residents. So the nearest place you'd have to go is either Palm Springs or Palm Desert or going the other way all the way into Redlands. And so for a lot of people that need to go into the DMV, sometimes that does make it harder because maybe work constraints, they can't go that far. It takes too much time out of their day. Maybe they don't have the means to get somewhere that far. So having a DMV serving our region is important. And so Senator Rosalisa Ochoa-Bogue is leading the charge on that. And the city certainly supports her in that endeavor. So hopefully she can make some traction on that issue. But if we hear anything else on that, we will keep you posted. In the future episodes of this podcast, I want to bring in guests from some of our regional agencies. So ones that we are represented on or are members of, which is like the Riverside County Transportation Commission, maybe have their executive director on, the Regional Conservation Authority, WRCOG, the Western Riverside County Council of Governments. That would be another one that we want to have on. I just had a meeting yesterday with their Deputy Executive Director, Chris Gray, and I want to bring him in to talk about the TUMF program and maybe some other things related to demographics. He's done a lot of research on demographics for the region, and so he's got some great insight that I'd like to talk to him about. We can also talk to the Riverside Transit Agency, which we're a member of, and as well as the general manager of the San Gregorio Pass Water Agency that can talk about regional water issues. And so they are the regional wholesaler for State Water Project water in our region. So we can bring in Lance Eckert to talk about his agency and the things they're doing to promote sustainability in our region for water. So now let's get into what my August looked like. So in the first episode of this podcast of Calamasa Insider, if you go back to listen to that's over a year old, I did my best to describe what I do as city manager for Calamasa. And so a city manager, just as a quick recap, the city manager is the equivalent of a CEO in a private company, with the city council serving as the board of directors. So they're the board of directors, and the residents, the voting public, are the shareholders. So um, every resident that's eligible to vote, they each have a vote. So they're like shareholders of this Calimesa Corporation. The board of directors is the city council, and I'm the CEO that's appointed by that board of directors. The only difference is that a lot of times in some of these companies, you'll see the CEO also as the chairman of the board, because they own a majority of the stock in that company or something like that. Obviously, unless you have a strong mayor, typically you're going to see a city manager appointed by the city council, and that is the case in the vast majority of cities in California. I am the only full-time employee that works directly for the city council. Now, the city attorney is also selected by the city council, but he is not a full-time employee. So he works for the law firm of Richards, Watson, Gershon. I always have a hard time saying that fast. And so we contract out. So the city contracts out for legal services, but the council makes that selection directly. I don't have a say in that contract, nor should I, because the city attorney doesn't work for the city staff. They work directly for the city council. And I'm the only full-time employee, though, of the city council. And as a city manager in a small city, especially with such a small staff, I act as my own management analyst. So, when you see a city manager office in a typical city, and he really needs to stop doing that. When you see that, I act as, you see in the city manager's office in other larger cities, they'll have like an analyst, an assistant to the city manager, maybe a dedicated ACM that just is dedicated to the city manager's office. We have a deputy city manager, but she also plays the role of city clerk, risk manager, HR manager, IT oversight, senior center liaison, mobile home rent control, all of those things. So obviously, Darlene's got a full plate, so I'm not going to ask her to do any analytical type of stuff as like a typical deputy city manager would do. But since she oversees so many functions and is such an important part of our city, we recognize her as our city manager or deputy city manager, and rightfully so. And so, of course, so I wore lots of hats, just like a lot of our staff members do. I talked about Darlene, and other people do on our staff as well, to just get things done, because we have no other choice. There are things we have to get done, and we only have so many people to do it. So everyone kind of has to pull in different things as they go on. So starting the beginning of this year, 2024, I started keeping a log of the major things I do every day. And I try to keep an activity log of the things I do, the meetings I go to, major milestones, interesting events, things like that. And so I use a product called OneNote, and I have like where I have my log. If I have a meeting where I have meeting notes for that meeting, I'll link to that directly to that tab. And I have a bunch of tabs related to city council, development, you name it. There's a lot of different things. I have a tab for each department when I have my regular meetings with staff, I keep my notes in there. So it's a very robust system that I've come up with, and it helps me review my activity. So the council does an annual review of my performance, and it allows me to it allowed me to more easily go through and write up my narrative of what we've accomplished for the year and what we've done for the year and things like that. But it also helps me remember things, because there's so many things going on, and there's so many and so many different aspects that I need, and my memory is not the greatest. So I really need to write things down so I remember it. And sometimes just the act of typing it out or writing it out helps me actually it kind of plants it in my memory a little bit better, and then I can recall things more easily rather than not writing it down. So, but then if I need to go look at it, I still have a record of it, and I can go back and say, oh, this last meeting we said we are going to do X, Y, and Z. So, and people are pretty amazed, like, oh, how'd you pull that up so fast? Because I've got my stuff organized in a way that I can understand. It wouldn't work for everybody, but it works for me. I also put together a goal list for the year based on city council priorities and direction, and the city's strategic plan, so I can track progress on those various things. So these lists that I have and these logs that I have allowed me to do a review of what I did the last month. Because without this, I probably would have left a lot out, and I would not be able to put together the narrative of what I actually do, because I would have probably left 90% of the things out. Um, in terms of the regular things that I do, I have standing meetings with each member of the city's leadership team, so I can be up to speed on things that are happening there. We talk a lot more often than that time, but I want to carve out time that is dedicated to just them, to help them. What allows me to offer any support that the team might need, or what the department might need, or following up on things like that. So it's just so that I'm engaged on what's happening with them, but more importantly, that I can provide support for them, and I can provide support where needed. So it's I want to make sure that they have their own time carved out dedicated to them. We also have executive staff meetings every off council Monday. So we have council meetings on the first and third Monday. So our staff meetings are on the second and fourth Monday of the month, and it just allows the team to be on the same page. Darlene goes over the agenda for the next meeting, and we'll say, there's staff reports that I'm expecting, they're outstanding. We try to get the status on those things. We also tell Darlene, okay, these are other things that are going to be on the agenda. So there's agenda management and planning that happens with those meetings as well. I do have regular meetings with each council member, and the frequency just depends on their needs and their schedules. So some of them are retired, don't work full time. Others do have full-time jobs that are very demanding, and so they can only schedule to meet on certain times and days. So I work to their schedule, and usually what we do in those meetings is I provide major updates. I talk to them about things that will be coming up on the city council agenda, answer any questions they may have, and talk about things that matter to them. For some, I also review agendas for the regional boards they sit on. So one of the things that I do with Mayor Pro Tem Hewitt, for example, is we actually have a dedicated time to go through the WRCOG agenda. If we have staff has any feedback, concerns, things like that she can relay during her executive committee meetings for WRCOG. I also meet with the mayor every Thursday to sign checks. So I see the mayor at least once a week. All of our checks require 2 signatures, and it's the mayor and I are usually the ones that sign them, but we do have backups if one or both of us are unavailable. So backups are the mayor pro tem and the deputy city manager. And so as you're aware, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, I record the podcast every Friday. So as soon as I record it, I do some editing, like audio editing, just to make sure it sounds right and that the volume's consistent, things like that, and then I post it. So when you're hearing this and we see it posted, it's usually recorded that same exact day. The exception was when I did that, the special on the realities that I did a few episodes ago, episodes 14 through 17. I pre-recorded a couple of episodes knowing I was going to be out on vacation. So I didn't record those the same day they were posted. I had them scheduled to be posted at the times on those Fridays to stay consistent with the podcast. And finally, and this is one that people may go, wait a minute, what? Like, what are you talking about here? Why are you doing this? Planning and engineering staff have frequent meetings with developers on some of our major projects. So Mesa Verde, Summerwind, all that kind of stuff. And the goal of that, most of these meetings have to do with staff asking many questions about projects, technical studies, asking for further analysis on things, negotiating of development agreements, you name it, right? And you'd be amazed at how many different things are involved with these massive projects and all the detail that goes into these things. But our goal is to make sure that a project has aspects that are in the best interest of the city, that proper infrastructure gets built to support the project, and that the city gets value from these projects to ensure the city's sustainability in the future, among many other things. So there's a lot of different factors, and we heavily scrutinize these projects. And there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of things that we go, hey, you need to fix this, you need to review this more, we need more information on that. And that's why a lot of these things take years, because it takes time for us to review it. And then when we send them back, it takes time for the developer to come up with the changes that we're asking for, and a lot of negotiation. And they probably have funding constraints on their end too. It's not like these guys have just endless bottomless pockets, right? They have budgets they have to follow, and so sometimes if funding gets tough for a developer, they're going to have to basically hit the pause button sometimes on their projects. So that's why a lot of these things take years to go from concept to final approval. And then even after approval happens, there's still a lot of review and back and forth that has to happen. So, and in addition to that, right now, some of these meetings have also been with the remaining developers in Summerwind to strategize how the public improvements within Oak Valley Town Center can move forward. So I described kind of the situation of what's happening at Oak Valley back in episode 7. And there hasn't been a lot that has changed since then, but we are still actively engaged in this process so that we can get the public improvements in. We do care about that because, part of the issue we have right now is Roberts Road, which went all the way through to Singleton previously, is now closed. It's permanently closed. So we have no bypass road on the west side of the freeway. We only have Calamasa Boulevard on the other side of the freeway. And so one of our biggest priorities is just to get that connection back and build it on the new alignment. So we're also actively engaged in pursuing performance bonds related to that work. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. And so that's why there hasn't been a lot of updates, because there's a lot of coordination that has to happen between parties that have different interests, right? And so, and the city doesn't have the money to just go out and just do the improvements ourselves. We just don't have the capital to be able to do that. So that's why we're engaging on multiple fronts to try to get work going as quickly as possible. Speaking of developments, I shared with you in the previous episode that we are seeking advice from the FPPC on potential conflicts of interest for the Oak Valley North project relating to the distance the mayor and mayor pro tem live from the project. And that has occupied a lot of my time as well, discussing the potential conflicts with Mayor Davis and Mayor Pro Tem Hewitt, reviewing drafts of the letter seeking FPPC's advice, things like that. So that has actually kept a lot of my time, and especially our planning director, Kelly Lucia. She's spent a lot of time on that subject as well. So now the letter has been sent. They've acknowledged receipt of it, and that happened a while ago. So we're just waiting for them to get back to us on that. So we do anticipate we will have that determination before September 23rd, which is when the hearing was continued to. So now let's get into some of the specific things. In addition to all the things that I described to this point, these are the other things that I also do. On the first Thursday of every month, so this case it was August 1st, I have a breakfast meeting with Mayor Davis and the mayors and city managers of Beaumont and Banning. And these meetings allow us to talk about, what's going on in each of our cities and talk about ongoing and potential collaborations in the pass area. And so having elected officials there, in addition to the city managers, that conversation is more at a policy level, but it's also just to kind of, build that rapport so that when we do have opportunities to work together, there's already some familiarity there between not only the city managers, but also the elected officials. On August 5th, we had a city council meeting, of course, which I recapped on a previous episode of the podcast. And then through House Community Project funding via Congressman Ken Calvert, the city received, among other projects, $1 million to aid in the construction of an emergency operations center. So also on August 5th, I had a call with the California Office of Emergency Services, which is the conduit for the funding, to review the project and make sure all the paperwork is in order for us to get access to that funding. So we're going through that process right now because there's a lot of paperwork that has to do with the federal and state governments in order to get that funding secured. The funding's there; it's earmarked for us. It's just a matter of documenting everything properly. Sheriff's Captain Al Northrup, Fire Chief Tim O'Connell, and we met with the Sheriff's Services Ad Hoc Committee on August 12th. And that consists of the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Manley. And we did a more thorough introduction to Captain Northrup, as well as reviewing potential public safety ordinances to bring forward for the full city council to consider. And we are planning to have those drafted and ready for the city council on October 7th. Captain Northrup also shared some potential templates for crime reporting. So those are things that we want to start including in our agenda packet. So that will be available to the public. So he's working on getting those available to us shortly. So hopefully in the next month or two, we'll start having those reports available for the public. So to give you better, more additional data of what's happening with our sheriff's department, our police services. City Manager Mike Thornton, Finance Director Celeste Reed, and I met on Meet Monthly, and this time it was on also on Monday, August 12th, to discuss the status of our various CIP projects and to review the budgets of those projects to ensure we're on track financially. So we started having these monthly meetings a few months ago, and they seem to have been very helpful to make sure that finance and engineering are on the same page in terms of those projects. And I also obviously want to get updates on where we are with the different projects as well. On the morning of August 13th, I attended the Calamasa Chamber of Commerce monthly breakfast where Sheriff Chad Bianco was the speaker. And also on August 13th, Councilmember Molina, who was the city's rep for RCTC, the city engineer, and I met with the executive director of RCTC, Aaron Hake, and one of his associates, Jillian. I can't remember her last name, but she works in she oversees their capital project program. And we were there to discuss funding options and opportunities for construction for the construction phase of the Cherry Valley Boulevard interchange with I-10. And we began the engineering and design phase recently. So construction isn't imminent. That process is expected to be wrapped up by the end of 2025. But we do need to get out ahead of the funding since the construction is expected to be $65 to $75 million. And it will likely take a combination of federal, state, and local funds to get it done. Now, almost all the local funds will be from developers, but in getting federal and state money, when that's not going to fund the entire project, when you don't have the match secured, because you can use state money to match federal money and vice versa. But usually these programs say you need to have the funding secured with this funding included, you can fully fund the project. Now you can include uncommitted funds. So in other words, what you can do is you can apply for state and federal funding concurrently, but you're not scored as high as projects that have all of their funding together except for this one piece. So it does make the grant process a lot more difficult to get money. And there's a lot more projects that need funding than money that's available. So there's going to be a lot of effort, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time over the next year lobbying for our city to be able to get funding for that project. But we are already starting to work on it now because it does take that long sometimes to get this funding secured. And you may have to try a couple of times to be able to get it. So and another thing that's going to happen is elections, right? Elections could change the programs that are available, right? Either how they're administered or the programs that are available. They could go, some could change, some could, go away, some could be added. We don't know what that's going to look like with an election coming up, especially at the federal level. So that's where federal politics do impact us as a city in these respects. So we're working on that, and that'll become a theme here as we go on. On the next day, August 14th, the city manager and I, or the city engineer and I, had our second meeting with a group of residents from Oak Hills to discuss the condition of Cell Rocco Drive. Now, the history on that probably could be its own podcast episode, but the bottom line is, just the Reader's Digest version. We're working with the HOA and nearby residents to come up with a solution for road maintenance leading up to Oak Hills. And that development was originally approved in the late 70s by the county, or actually early 80s, by the county. And so the right-of-way was dedicated, but the actual street was not built to county standards, and they never accepted it for maintenance. So when we became a city, we inherited all the streets in the county maintenance system. Cell Rocco wasn't one of them. So we're working basically on a way to get the road reconstructed so that it is to city standards and that we can take it over and maintain it going forward. So that's been an ongoing thing probably since we incorporated, really. I think maybe in the first 10 years it wasn't because the road was relatively new at that point, but as it started, as it got to 20 years old, started to deteriorate. So early 2000s, this became an issue, and it's been an ongoing issue since then. So I think we're as close to a solution as we ever have been. So I'm excited about that, that possibility and working with them. So far, our meetings with them have been positive, and we're hoping to come to a good resolution with them. On August 15th, I attended the WRCOG Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC meeting. The TAC consists of the city managers from each city within WRCOG, and we usually are the final staff level body of approval before the items are brought to the executive committee. So usually they're vetted through us first before they come to the executive committee, which consists of the elected officials from each member agency for final approval. And by the way, Mayor Pro Tem Hewitt is our representative for WRCOG. The major item we reviewed was the TUMF Nexus study. So we talked about TUMF in episode 9 of the podcast, if you want more detail on what that is. But the Nexus study updates the fees, or at least it updates the cost of the improvements related to the what TUMF is going to fund, and then recommends fee levels based on those results. And so that it basically tells you, okay, these are the types of these are the fees that should be charged per each type of development based on their fair share of those TUMF improvements. So the executive committee, we approved it with some recommended changes that they're going to bring forward to the executive committee, and the executive committee will consider the Nexus study for approval on September 9th. And I think the staff is also asking them to adopt new fees associated with that. Now, those fees won't go into effect until next month, or until sometime next year. But keep in mind, TUMF is only paid when building. It's a development impact fee. So if you're buying like an existing house, the TUMF for that house has already been paid for. And it's not going to be something that you pay as ongoing as a resident. This is just something for new builds, new development. That's all that pays for it. So just want to make that clear. The morning of August 19th, I started my day with a breakfast meeting with Beaumont City Manager Elizabeth Gibbs and Banning City Manager Doug Schultz. So in addition to those mayor and city manager breakfasts on the first Thursday, we also get together on the third Monday of every month to discuss what's happening in our city, more at a staff level. It's usually a lot more about collaboration, things that were going on, and also things that were maybe discussed at that breakfast that we need to take action on as staff members. And it's really been, I will say, it's been a really good partnership with the 3 pass area managers. And this has nothing to do with me necessarily, because I think Bonnie worked very well with Elizabeth Gibbs as well. But the managers we have right now in the city, in the 3 cities, get along very well. We work very well together. And I think that collaboration, that solid partnership, I think will lead to a lot of good things that will benefit all the residents and businesses of the past. These relationships are very important. It allows us to leverage our regional approach. When going at it things alone, we may not get very far. But when you get 3 cities together that have a population of 80,000 plus together, now maybe you've got a bigger voice. And so we continue to work on that, and it's because it's important, I think, for everybody in the past to do that. Mike Thornton and I had lunch with a potential developer also on that day, to possibly bring a development which will create some high quality manufacturing jobs to the city. It's in the vicinity of where we need to realign Calamasa Boulevard. So we're trying to integrate an approach with that would integrate both the manufacturing company and suit their needs, and allow for much needed retail development within that area too. So this is kind of a combination. It's kind of cool. It's kind of a combination between planning, engineering, and economic development. And I can't share. I'm being vague on purpose. I can't share too much because there's a lot of moving parts. There's negotiating between private parties and private owners still. But I really like what this project could bring for us. High quality manufacturing jobs. Those are things that are highly coveted. And so to bring a project like that, this can benefit the residents here. So maybe they can come more closer and make a good, decent living while working and living close, working close to home. I think would be a big boon for our city. So I'm excited about when this project came forward. It really got my attention. I'm really excited about it because I think that it's something that the community really can get behind. I know there's other projects that have been more on the controversial side, but I think that a development like this could have a lot of potential to be great for the city. So, Mike and I also met with a grant writer again about how to put together funding for the Cherry Valley Boulevard interchange. Then, of course, that night we had our city council meeting, which I recapped on last week's show. So if you want to know more about that, listen to that episode. And if you already listened to it, you already know. August 20th actually was a pretty light day for me. I met with our finance director and we discussed how the closing of fiscal year 24 books is progressing and some potential updates to our financial reserve policy, which we plan to bring to council, I believe, on September 16th, as well as other financial and accounting policies. I actually had time to sit down and write a staff report to renew our animal services contract with Riverside County. So we'll bring that to council for consideration on September 16th. I actually completed some cyber security training that took all of like 20 minutes, but that is something that we do. We want to make sure that we're up to scratch on that. And, a former employer of mine got hacked actually not too long ago. So that was a little jarring to hear that. You hear about public agencies getting targeted for cybersecurity attacks, but this was the first time that it's been a former employer of mine. So that was that's a little too close to home. I also reviewed, speaking of IT and cybersecurity, I also reviewed proposals for IT services. So 9 proposals in total. So since the contract with our current provider is expiring on November 1st, and then on the next day, August 21st, Mike Thornton and I met with Chris Gray, the Deputy Executive Director of WRCOG, to discuss potential funding strategies to kick off the planning for upgrades to the Sandalwood Drive interchange with I-10. And of course, we also talked about funding strategies for the Cherry Valley Boulevard interchange. On August 22nd, the Deputy City Manager, Darlene Gertis, our accountant, Alana Figueroa, who also does some stuff for us in IT, we got together to review those IT proposals, and we decided on which firm we wanted to interview. We all had a unanimous talk pick, so we will be meeting with them next week, and our goal is to have a contract for City Council consideration on September 16th. And this week was mostly related to regular standing meetings that I discussed before, but staff did meet with Yucaipa staff to talk about the status of current and future projects along County Line Road, as well as trying to get information on the progress of the warehouse just north of County Line Road in Yucaipa. There's still utility work that needs to be done, as well as the installation of a traffic signal. And that's something that we pushed for, and we advocated for to mitigate some of the impacts of that warehouse and the traffic impacts specifically. And the signal must be installed and operational prior to the certificate of occupancy for that building to be issued. And Calamasa staff will be watching very closely to make sure it happens that way. So again, a lot of the traffic impacts come into Calamasa, so we want to make sure that, at least to the extent possible, we advocated for our position. We were in a kind of a hard position because the EIR for that had been approved years ago, and so it was an allowed use. So there was no EIR to comment on. So there was limited things that we can do, but we did go to their planning commission and lobby them to add additional mitigation measures, which they agreed to. Yesterday, finally, the Mayor Pro Tem and I met with Chris Gray, again from WRCOG, to go over the Nexus study that I talked about previously. And this allowed the Mayor Pro Tem to get some of her questions answered and have a better understanding of the study before it comes, because there's a lot of technical data. So having an understanding of it going in may allow her to ask more pointed questions and have more of a kind of an understanding of what the project is, because just hearing it once and having to decide on it is a really tough thing to do. So you want to be able to have that chance to talk about it, talk it through, go over it in more detail, so that you can make a more informed decision when it comes up for a vote. So looking ahead to September, here are some of the things that I've got going on. We have our monthly breakfast, mayors and city managers breakfast on September 5th. September 10th, the Calamasa Chamber Breakfast will feature Senator Rosalisa Ochoa-Bogue. She'll be the speaker, and tickets are available for that at calamasachamber.com/events. September 16th, of course, we have our city council meeting. September 18th, our executive staff will be doing an all-day off-site team building event to create further cohesion as a team. As a small city, it's important that we work well together and that we have open communication. And so that's a goal that we're trying to achieve with that. We already get along very well, but I think there's some things we can do to improve upon, and that only will allow us to serve our public better ultimately. On September 19th, we are having a retirement lunch for Mike McCabe, who will be retiring after almost 26 years of service to the city's Public Works Department. So it's bittersweet. We're happy for Mike that he's going to be moving on to bigger and better things, but it's always hard to lose somebody that's worked for our city that long. So with all that institutional knowledge and experience. So it'll be a bittersweet day on September 19th. September 23rd, of course, is the continuance of the public hearing for the Oak Valley North project. And September 26th is our 2024 State of the City. That'll be presented by the Calamasa Chamber of Commerce and will be held at the Plantation on the Lake Recreation Center from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And just like the Calamasa Chamber Breakfast, you can get those tickets for that event at calamasachamber.com/events. All right, and that will wrap it up. Thank you for joining us this week on the podcast. Reminder, there is no city council meeting next Monday due to the Labor Day holiday, so our next city council meeting will be Monday, September 16th. And as we head into Labor Day weekend, this is truly a holiday we can actually celebrate and relax, but please do so responsibly. Don't drink and drive. Be careful out there, and don't strain yourself too much because it will also be hot. So stay cool, have a good time, but just make sure that you're there ready to go on Tuesday when the holiday is over. Until next week, enjoy your extra day off. This is the Calamasa Insider Podcast. I'm Will Kolbow, and we will see you next time.